In the dawn of time, when the world was fresh from the primeval waters of Nun, and the sun god Ra ruled from the heavens, humanity flourished beneath his benevolent gaze. The fertile lands along the great river Nile teemed with life, and the hearts of men and women were filled with reverence for their creator. They knew the warmth of Ra's sun, the bounty of Hapi's flood, and the gentle touch of Ma'at, the cosmic order he had set in place. For many eons, this harmony prevailed. A golden age where the prayers of mankind ascended like sweet incense to the sky, and the gods, in turn, showered blessings upon their favored creation. But even the purest gold can tarnish, and the longest day must eventually yield to the shadow. As generations passed, a subtle shift began to ripple through the hearts of mortals. The ease of their lives, the constant flow of divine grace, started to breed not gratitude, but a creeping sense of entitlement. The sun rose and set, the river flooded and receded, crops grew in abundance. These became not miracles, but the expected rhythm of existence. The whispers the murmurs grew louder, swelling into a chorus of discontent that echoed across the plains and settlements. Why do they demand our tribute? Some dared to ask, their voices emboldened by the growing numbers who shared their rebellious thoughts. Do we not toil with our own hands? Do we not raise the temples and carve the statues? Is our sweat not sufficient offering? From the bustling markets of Memphis to the quiet villages nestled in the delta, a new philosophy took root. Humanity was self-sufficient, capable of charting its own course, free from the supposed shackles of divine oversight. This defiance was not a sudden roar, but a slow, insidious poison. Temples stood half-finished, their foundations crumbling before the capstones could be placed. Offerings grew scarce, replaced by lavish feasts for mortal kings and queens. The sacred rituals, once performed with fervent devotion, became hollow motions, empty gestures devoid of true faith. Children were taught to question, elders learned to doubt, and the sacred pact between heaven and earth began to fray like an old tapestry. Thread by thread, high above, in the celestial bark that carried him across the sky, Ra felt the shift. He was the all-seeing, the creator of all things, and no thought, no matter how fleeting, escaped his golden gaze. At first, it was a subtle dimming of the light, a slight chill in the warmth he cast upon the earth. Then came the discord, a dissonance in the grand symphony of Ma'at, a disruption that plucked at the very strings of his cosmic order. His heart, the source of all life and light, felt a pang, not of anger initially, but of profound sorrow. He had created them in his image, breathed life into their clay forms, given them the gift of consciousness and the freedom to choose. And they had chosen defiance. He saw the unfinished temples, the neglected altars, the faces turned away from the sky. He heard their arrogant boasts, their claims of self-mastery, their dismissals of the very power that sustained them. The golden age was not merely fading, it was being actively dismantled by the hands of those it had blessed the most. Ra, the great god, felt the weight of his creation's ingratitude, a burden heavier than the sun itself. Ra descended from his celestial bark to the sacred council hall, a chamber of pure light and starlight, where the great gods of Egypt gathered. His form, usually radiant and unwavering, held a subtle tremor, a reflection of the turmoil within his divine being. Before him stood Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, his children; Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, his grandchildren; and the wise Thoth, scribe of the gods, with his ibis head bent in thoughtful contemplation. My children, Ra's voice rumbled, not with thunder, but with a deep, resonant sorrow that echoed through the ethereal hall. The beings I created, those I gifted with life and consciousness, have turned their backs on Ma'at. They have forgotten their place, forgotten the source of their bounty. They whisper of rebellion. They deny my authority, and their hearts are steeped in ingratitude. A ripple of concern passed through the assembled deities. Shu's usually calm breath seemed to catch Tefnut's eyes, usually sparkling, dulled with apprehension. They plot against me, Ra continued, his voice hardening, believing they can usurp the very order of the cosmos. A grave silence filled the chamber, punctuated only by the distant hum of the celestial spheres. The golden age was over. The stage was set for a reckoning. The air in the celestial council hall crackled with unspoken tension. The divine beings, usually serene in their eternal wisdom, now shifted uneasily, their gazes fixed upon Ra. Thoth, ever the scholar, held his stylus poised over an unfurled papyrus, though no words yet flowed from his mind. Shu and Tefnut exchanged worried glances, their spirits sensing the terrible storm brewing in their father's heart. They have forgotten the meaning of the feather of Ma'at, Ra declared, his voice rising, now tinged with a righteous indignation that pierced the quiet. They have forsaken balance, truth, and justice. They scorn the very hand that feeds them. He paused, his fiery eyes sweeping over the assembled deities. What say you, my children? What judgment should be meted out to those who defile the sacred order, who dare to plot against their Creator? A heavy silence descended, for none wished to be the first to speak against humanity. Yet none dared to contradict the burgeoning wrath of Ra. The burden of this decision, heavy as a mountain, seemed to hang in the very air, waiting to be lifted or to crush. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Ra's patience, boundless as the cosmos itself, finally snapped. A searing heat began to emanate from his being, a golden aura that intensified with each passing moment, making the very fabric of the celestial hall shimmer. His eyes, usually pools of serene light, narrowed into slits of pure, incandescent fury. They deserve punishment, he proclaimed, his voice now a roar that echoed across the heavens, a lesson so terrible, so absolute, that it will etch the meaning of Ma'at into their very souls, or utterly erase them from existence. As he spoke, a fearsome transformation began. The light in his right eye, which had always seen the truth and known the deepest secrets, began to swell and glow with an unbearable intensity. It became a miniature sun, pulsating with raw, unbridled power. It detached itself from his form, a blinding orb of concentrated energy, searing the air and casting long, dancing shadows across the faces of the terrified gods. This was not merely an eye. It was an extension of Ra's deepest will, a living embodiment of his divine wrath, born of the primal force that forged the universe. From the incandescent core of Ra's detached eye, a form began to coalesce. First, a shimmering outline, then the unmistakable shape of a lioness. But a lioness unlike any seen on earth. Her mane was a fiery inferno, her skin glowed with the heat of 1,000 suns, and her eyes burned with an unquenchable thirst for retribution. With a final explosive burst of light and a roar that shook the firmament, Sekhmet, the mighty one, the goddess of war and pestilence, sprang forth into being. She stood before the stunned deities, magnificent and terrible, her presence an inferno of divine judgment. Her voice, when she spoke, was like the crackling of distant thunder, promising destruction. "I am the Eye of Ra," she declared, her gaze sweeping across the trembling gods, her power so immense that even they recoiled. "I am the vengeance of the Creator, sent to cleanse the earth of its defilement, to bring balance where injustice has taken root." Her thirst for justice, raw and untamed, was palpable, a primordial force unleashed with a singular, terrifying purpose: the complete and utter annihilation of humanity. With a snarl that rent the celestial fabric, Sekhmet turned her gaze downward towards the unsuspecting world below. The lands of men, once bathed in Ra's gentle light, now felt the oppressive weight of her scorching fury. She descended like a meteor, a living star of destruction, her fiery mane leaving a trail of smoke and ash across the sky. Her first touch upon the earth was not a landing, but an explosion of raw power, igniting forests, boiling rivers, and crumbling mountains into dust. Panic erupted amongst humanity. The whispers of rebellion turned into screams of terror. They looked up to the heavens, no longer questioning Ra's authority, but pleading for mercy from the monstrous, lion-headed goddess who now stalked their lands. Sekhmet, however, was deaf to their cries, blind to their fear. She saw only the stain of their disobedience, the desecration of Ma'at, and the bitter taste of Ra's betrayal. Her claws, sharper than any blade, tore through cities. Her fiery breath scorched the earth, and with each swing of her mighty paws, thousands of lives were extinguished, their bodies reduced to cinders, their rebellion crushed under the weight of divine wrath. This was not a warning. It was the beginning of the end. Sekhmet's rampage knew no bounds. Across the once fertile plains, where golden wheat had swayed in the breeze, now lay fields of carnage stained a horrific crimson. The Nile itself, the lifeblood of Egypt, began to run red, not with the rich silt of its annual flood, but with the vital essence of countless mortals. Sekhmet, driven by an insatiable hunger for justice, saw only the enemies of Ra, the transgressors against Ma'at. Her roars echoed across the land, a symphony of destruction, each one followed by the terrified shrieks of the doomed. From sunrise to sunset, and through the moonless nights, the slaughter continued without pause. Her form, once merely fiery, now seemed to draw strength from the very devastation she wrought. Her coat grew darker, slick with the ichor of her victims. Her eyes glowed with an even more terrifying intensity. She moved like a storm, an unstoppable force of nature, driven by the pure, unadulterated fury of her Creator. Humanity, once so defiant, now broke and scattered, their organized rebellion dissolved into a primal scramble for survival, yet nowhere was safe from the eye of Ra. The air grew thick with the stench of death and the acrid smoke of burning cities. Temples, once abandoned, were now thronged with desperate survivors, praying to gods they had scorned, their voices hoarse with terror. But Sekhmet did not discriminate. Those who knelt in fear were swept away with those who had once plotted defiance. She moved through the landscape like a reaper's scythe, gathering souls into the duat, her fury a purifying fire, stripping the earth bare of its perceived impurities. Each fallen mortal, each spray of blood, fueled her further, strengthening her resolve, sharpening her hunger. The initial anger that had spawned her from Ra's eye had transformed into a primal, almost joyful ecstasy of destruction. She relished the hunt, the chase, the final terrifying moments of her prey. The earth groaned beneath her paws, the very stones weeping as the life force drained from the world. It was a harvest unlike any other, not of grain and fruit, but of life itself, reaped with divine precision and an unyielding will. The few scattered survivors huddled in caves and desolate corners of the land, their faces etched with horror, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. They watched, helpless, as their world burned, as their loved ones became dust and blood. The sky, once a brilliant blue, was now a perpetual twilight, obscured by the smoke of countless pyres, reflecting the gloom in their hearts. Their defiant boasts had long been silenced, replaced by a profound, agonizing wail that ascended to the heavens, a lament for their folly, for their lost future, for the sheer, brutal finality of divine wrath. Their prayers were no longer selfish demands, but desperate cries for mercy, for a cessation of this endless slaughter. They were willing to prostrate themselves, to offer anything, to renounce everything, if only the terrible lioness would cease her work. But Sekhmet did not hear their pleas. She was too engrossed in her bloody task, too consumed by the primal satisfaction of vengeance. The sound of their lamentation was merely another note in her symphony of destruction, a validation of the justice she was delivering. High above, in his celestial barque, Ra watched the unfolding catastrophe. At first, there had been a grim satisfaction in seeing Ma'at reasserted, in witnessing the punishment of those who had defied him. But as days bled into weeks, and the sheer scale of Sekhmet's destruction became horrifyingly apparent, a new emotion began to stir in his divine heart. Regret. The earth, once vibrant and bustling with life, was becoming a barren wasteland, a monument to his own furious judgment. Sekhmet was doing exactly as he commanded, perhaps even excelling beyond his expectations. But her fervor was boundless, her thirst for blood unquenchable. She was a reflection of his wrath, pure and unadulterated, yet she seemed to have no limit, no understanding of mercy. Ra had wished to teach humanity a lesson, to restore balance, not to erase all of creation. He saw the suffering of the innocent, the terror in the eyes of those who had harbored no ill will, and the grand symphony of life he had orchestrated was rapidly devolving into a single agonizing shriek of death. The Creator felt the weight of his own terrible power. The other gods, who had initially recoiled in fear from Sekhmet's birth, now watched in growing alarm. They saw Ra's growing despair, sensed the impending annihilation of the world they too cherished. Geb, the earth, trembled beneath the endless slaughter, and Nut, the sky, wept tears of starlight that evaporated before reaching the scorched ground. Shu, the very air, became thick with the dust of destruction, and Tefnut, moisture, felt her springs and rivers diminish, "Father," Shu pleaded, his voice a soft gust of wind that struggled against the roar of Sekhmet's distant rampage. "Enough! The lesson has been learned. If all humanity perishes, who will remain to sing your praises? Who will tend the sacred fires? Who will remember Ma'at if there are none left to comprehend it?" Tefnut added her voice, a gentle plea like falling rain. "The balance is broken, Father, not restored. Mercy must temper justice, or justice becomes mere annihilation." Ra listened, his golden face etched with turmoil. He had unleashed a force he could no longer control, an embodiment of his own wrath that threatened to undo all that he had created. He needed a solution, and quickly, before the very last spark of life was extinguished from the world, his gaze fell upon the ever-wise Thoth, hope flickering in his divine eyes. Ra turned to Thoth, his gaze imploring, a silent plea for wisdom in the face of his own overwhelming regret. Thoth, the patient scribe, the keeper of knowledge and secrets, had watched the unfolding tragedy with a heavy heart, his mind ceaselessly working, seeking a solution where none seemed possible. He understood the fierce, unyielding nature of Sekhmet, the embodiment of Ra's justice, but he also understood the delicate balance of Ma'at, where compassion was as vital as order. Great Ra, Thoth began, his voice calm and clear, a stark contrast to the chaos below. Sekhmet's thirst is for blood, the very essence of life. She sees in it the validation of her purpose, the culmination of your wrath. To simply command her to cease would be to ask the sun to stop shining, for she is the burning heart of your vengeance. He paused, his ibis head tilted in contemplation, a flicker of insight in his keen eyes. Her anger must be quenched, not by force, but by deception. Her thirst must be sated, but not with the lives of the innocent. The other gods leaned forward, their hopes rekindled, a fragile flame in the deepening gloom. Thoth's wisdom was their only hope, a beacon in the encroaching dark. "Listen closely," Thoth instructed, his voice low but firm, the plan forming rapidly in his brilliant mind. "We need a substance that resembles blood in color, but holds the power to pacify, to subdue the raging fire within her. A brew that will trick her senses, satisfy her terrible hunger, and dull the edge of her boundless fury." He gestured towards Shu and Tefnut. "Gather vast quantities of red ochre from the earth, enough to dye the very sands. To others," he commanded, "bring forth barley, the finest grain, and ferment it into the strongest beer ever concocted. Let it be potent, rich, and overwhelming." Under Thoth's meticulous direction, the gods sprang into action. Shu gathered the red ochre, clouds of crimson dust rising as he swept through the mountains. Tefnut summoned her moisture, drawing water from hidden springs, the last pure liquid on earth. The goddess Nephthys, with her skill in ritual and magic, oversaw the brewing, chanting ancient incantations to imbue the beer with potent soporific properties. Millions of jars were filled, mountains of red powder mixed with the fermented barley, until a vast churning sea of blood-red liquid filled the great vats of the celestial realm. It was indistinguishable from the blood that now drenched the earth, an insidious, beautiful deception. As dawn approached, just before Sekhmet was to embark on yet another day of slaughter, the gods poured the vast quantity of red beer onto the plains below. It flowed like a great river, a terrifying crimson deluge that spread across the land, filling the dry riverbeds, soaking into the parched earth, and reflecting the first rays of the rising sun with a horrifying metallic sheen. To any eye, it was a boundless ocean of fresh blood, a testament to Sekhmet's tireless work. Sekhmet, stalking through the devastation, her senses still alight with the thrill of the hunt, paused. Her eyes, usually fixed on fleeing mortals, widened at the sight. Before her lay not scattered victims, but an endless, glistening pool of the very substance she craved. It stretched to the horizon, a monument to her ferocity, a reward for her unwavering loyalty to Ra. She let out a triumphant roar, a sound of pure, unadulterated satisfaction, believing she had finally completed her gruesome task, that the entire world had been purified by her hand. Without hesitation, Sekhmet lowered her majestic head to the crimson lake. The scent, though slightly different, was close enough to her desired feast. She began to drink, lapping at the rich red liquid with ferocious intensity. Bowl after bowl, jar after jar, the intoxicating brew flowed down her throat. With each gulp, the potent barley beer began its work. The fire in her eyes dimmed slightly. The tautness in her muscles began to relax, and the all-consuming hunger that had driven her for weeks started to wane, replaced by a strange, pleasant warmth. She drank until her belly was distended, until her senses swam in a pleasant haze. The rage that had burned so fiercely within her began to ebb, replaced by a profound drowsiness. The faces of the fleeing mortals, which had once stirred her fury, now seemed distant, indistinct. Her mighty paws, once so eager for destruction, felt heavy. Her fiery mane flickered and softened. Finally, the last vestiges of her overwhelming wrath receded, and with a soft groan that was more akin to a purr, Sekhmet, the destroyer, collapsed onto the blood-red earth, falling into a deep, dreamless slumber. The world, for the first time in weeks, was silent save for the soft lapping of the red beer. The world held its breath. Days passed, marked by the slow, cautious return of the surviving animals to their devastated lands, and the anxious whispers of the gods gathered in their celestial hall. Sekhmet lay motionless, a colossal figure of a lioness, her breathing deep and even, her once fiery body now cool to the touch. The crimson beer, absorbed by the parched earth, had left behind a lingering scent of barley and a faint, rusty stain on the ground, a silent testament to the deception that had saved humanity. Ra watched from above, his heart a mixture of relief and trepidation. Had Thoth's plan truly worked? Or would Sekhmet awaken with renewed fury, her thirst for blood now intensified by the temporary respite? The fate of the world hung precariously in the balance, but then a subtle change began. A soft light, not of fire but of warmth, started to emanate from the sleeping goddess. The harsh lines of her lioness face softened, her mighty claws retracted, and her mane, though still golden, lost its infernal glow, taking on the gentle sheen of a rising sun. A transformation was occurring, not forced, but born from within, as the last vestiges of Ra's wrath dissolved in the intoxicating brew. Slowly, gracefully, Sekhmet stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and to the astonishment of all, they were no longer pools of searing fire, but soft, gentle orbs reflecting the blue of the sky and the green of the struggling new life. A serene smile touched her lips, replacing the eternal snarl. The formidable lioness form began to shift, to soften, to evolve. Her lioness head receded, replaced by the beautiful face of a woman, framed by a serene expression and eyes filled with boundless kindness. Cow's ears emerged, symbols of nurturing and fertility, and above her brow the solar disk nestled between two graceful cow horns, the unmistakable emblems of a new goddess. With a gentle stretch, she rose, no longer Sekhmet, the destroyer, but Hathor, the golden one, the goddess of joy, love, motherhood, and music. Her presence radiated warmth, compassion, and an intoxicating sense of life, so profound it caused the wilting plants around her to subtly straighten, and a bird, long silent, to attempt a tentative chirp. The transformation was complete. Ra's wrath had been appeased, his fears assuaged, and in its place a boundless love had emerged, born from the very heart of destruction. Hathor looked upon the devastation. But where Sekhmet had seen only targets for her wrath, Hathor saw sorrow, loss, and the desperate yearning for new life. A tear, clear as the purest water, traced a path down her cheek, washing away the last lingering shadow of her destructive past. She raised her hands, and from her lips flowed a sound unlike any ever heard on earth, a melody of pure, unadulterated forgiveness, a song of healing and renewal. It was a hymn to life, to growth, to the interconnectedness of all beings. The surviving mortals, still cowering in fear, felt its gentle touch, a warmth spreading through their frozen hearts, dissolving their terror, replacing it with a fragile, tentative hope. The gods in the heavens listened, captivated by its beauty, their own divine hearts filled with awe. Hathor's song was a balm for the wounded world, a promise of new beginnings, and a powerful declaration that love and compassion could indeed rise from the ashes of wrath. It was a sound of Ma'at being lovingly restored, not through punishment, but through understanding and grace. With Hathor's emergence, the world slowly began to heal. The red stains on the earth faded, absorbed by new growth. The smoke-filled sky cleared, revealing the brilliant blue and the warm golden sun of Ra. The Nile, purified by Tefnut's essence, flowed once more with clear, life-giving water. Under Hathor's gentle guidance, humanity, humbled and chastened, began to rebuild. They remembered their folly, not with bitterness, but with a profound understanding of the delicate balance of Ma'at. Temples were lovingly restored, not out of fear, but out of genuine gratitude and renewed reverence. Offerings were brought, not as tribute, but as expressions of love. The feather of Ma'at, once scorned, became the sacred symbol of their renewed covenant with the divine, a promise to uphold truth, balance, justice, and reciprocity. Hathor, once the harbinger of destruction, became the patroness of joy, music, and celebration, her presence ensuring that humanity would never again forget the lessons learned in the deluge of blood. The universe, restored to its rightful order, breathed a collective sigh of relief, its grand symphony playing once more in perfect harmony. The sun, Ra's eternal presence, continued its daily journey across the sky, but now its warmth carried a deeper wisdom, a gentle reminder of the fierce judgment that had almost consumed all. The story of Sekhmet and Hathor became an ancient teaching, whispered by elders to children, etched in hieroglyphs on temple walls, a timeless myth of the transformative power of mercy. It spoke not of divine caprice, but of the intricate dance between justice and compassion, of the understanding that even the most righteous anger, unchecked, can lead to devastation, and that true balance, ma'at, requires both the stern hand of order and the gentle embrace of love. Humanity, forever marked by the great cataclysm, learned that freedom from divine guidance was not true freedom, but a path to self-destruction. They learned that reverence was not servitude, but a recognition of their place within the cosmic tapestry, and the gods too had learned. Ra, the great creator, carried the memory of his regret, and the entire pantheon understood that while justice must be served, it must ultimately bend towards forgiveness, for only through compassion could creation truly flourish. The world had been brought to the brink of annihilation, only to be saved by a deception born of wisdom and transformed by the intoxicating power of mercy, blossoming into the eternal joy of Hathor, a testament to the enduring, cyclical nature of destruction, redemption, and the everlasting rebirth of the human spirit under the benevolent gaze of the gods. The echoes of that terrible reckoning faded into the mists of time, leaving behind a world imbued with a profound appreciation for the delicate, beautiful balance of ma'at.